you're doing well. We are going to cover some Friedrich Nietzsche live for you so you can nerd out. I think this would be very beneficial for people who want to kind of maybe socialize with other nerdy people. So, as you know, Nietzsche is a very popular figure throughout history. If you take any history course, literature course, you're going to come across Nietzsche constantly. Okay, so you cannot really escape him. And this is his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which hints at Western civilization and some problems thereof. Okay, so it can get you thinking, and it's always good to become familiar with his work because you actually gain some skills in analysis. So hopefully you can learn something. So let's pick up. We're on part 9, okay? This section, part number 9. Okay. To lure many away from the herd, for that I have come. The people and the herd shall be angry with me. Zarathustra wants to be called a robber by the shepherds. So notice this. Zarathustra wants to be called a robber by the shepherds. So think about that analogy there. These shepherds will be looking at him as someone who's taking away from the flock. Okay? If he's taking away from the flock, he's showing them a new direction, a new way of guidance. Now remember, Zarathustra was in the hills. He has a very unique perspective in how to deal with humans overall, which will make a lot of people upset in the beginning, right? So it is quite interesting. Shepherds, I say, but they call themselves the good and the just. Shepherds, I say, but they call themselves believers in the true faith. Behold, the good and the just, whom do they hate most? The man who breaks their tables of values. So notice that. Let me turn down the... It's a little chilly day, so the heater had to be on. So notice how he just said here, behold the good and the just. So he's sort of mocking at these shepherds, right? There's a play on words here. So, allegorical shepherds, or the sort of people who are in charge of guiding people in a sense of economic sources. Like, to be a shepherd has so many words, but he uses the word shepherd here because he's having a sort of jab at Christians in general. All right. Behold the good and the just, whom do they hate most? The man who breaks their tables of values. The breaker, the lawbreaker, yet he is the creator. Behold the believers of all faiths. Whom do ye hate most? The man who breaks their tables of values. So think about this table of values. So, literal table, but also a chart type of table. Think about that in your mind. So someone's at the table, that you smash your fist down. It's totally like, hey, you just ruined everything. You've spilled everything. It's not good. And then there's also like a chart table, like you list things out in an organized manner, how things are meant to be consumed. So this really gets you into the aspect of what is Nietzsche's play on words here of tables of values, right? Really makes you think. The lawbreaker, so here he has a point of, he wanted the shepherds to consider him a robber, and a robber is a lawbreaker. But here you see a different kind of play on the word lawbreaker. You have the sense of someone who goes against the orthodox, someone who is a renegade, somebody who went out of the usual framework of that time, right? Companions the Creator seeks, not corpses, not herds and believers. So notice this, that is actually pretty cool. And it kind of makes me think about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions. They were not just, they're not sheep. They were some people who could lead as well, which they did with the Khalifas, right? But here you see a good example. Do you want companions or do you want a herd? Because the herd is always following you. The herd can't necessarily help you. They instead follow you. And if you lead the herd off a cliff, well, the herd is following you. They cannot give you direction, right? They are going to go where you go. So it is quite interesting, right? It really makes you think. Fellow creators. The creator seeks those who write new values on new tablets. Companions the creator seeks. A fellow harvesters. For everything about him is ripe for the harvest. But he lacks 100 sickles. So he plucks ears and is annoyed. Companions the creator seeks. And such as know how to whet their sickles. Now look at that kind of imagery here. Okay? What is a sickle? It is that hook thing that looks like you know the Grim Reaper? He has one in his hand, right? That's a scythe, but a sickle is a little bit, it's almost like a hatchet looking thing, and it's really sharp. You use it to cut down wheat or obviously necks. So he's having an interesting aspect here. What is he whetting the sickle with? You see what I'm saying? Destroyers they will be called, and despisers of good and evil, but they are the harvesters and those who celebrate. Fellow creators, Zarathustra seeks, fellow harvesters and fellow celebrants. What are herds and shepherds and corpses to him? So here you see fellow harvesters. This is a very deep, almost cryptic term, because when you harvest something is to cull something, right? This is really interesting because when the harvest season comes, people celebrate because usually that is in the time of autumn and fall, and this is when you're going to prepare for winter, stock up. A time of really ice frigid time. You know, it's a more difficult season. So here you're just seeing this compact word of harvest, okay? All the work you've put in is now come to fruition, and you get to reap your rewards by harvesting everything that you've sowed. So you get to take that out. And then you celebrate because you got to harvest it. So when he says Zarathustra seeks fellow harvesters, it's people who've put in work and have now earned their right to gather it all in. And he doesn't want corpses. You know, like, that is really interesting. Very interesting play on words. And you, my first companion, farewell. I buried you well in your hollow tree. I have hidden you well from the wolves. But I part from you. The time is up. Between dawn and dawn, a new truth has come to me. No shepherd shall I be, nor gravedigger. Never again shall I speak to the people. For the last time have I spoken to the dead. Now here, oh yeah. Now that's an interesting aspect right here. So for the last time I have spoken to the dead. So really examine that. People are alive yet they are walking dead. They're spiritually dead. They are not really aware. If you remember that Zarathustra has come down from his hermitage in the mountains, he has tried to tell the people how to become stronger, more in their will, and not just to be aimless. So when he says, you know, he doesn't want to speak to the dead, that's like a very playful yet cryptic way of talking about the consciousness of people, right? Now, the shepherd and the gravedigger. The shepherd takes you to an end to try to sustain you, whereas the gravedigger puts you where you need to be put so that you're out of the way and so that, you know, you can be reabsorbed into the earth, right? You are not meant to stick out of your grave. Just like if a shepherd, he's not supposed to let any sheep stick out of a flock. He's supposed to keep them together. So in the flock, if you think about it, he's keeping the unit together. A gravedigger is keeping all your body deeply into the soil, surrounded in the soil, so, you know, no wolves or coyotes can dig you out and eat you. So no crows can, you know, get through the soil and eat you. It's really a type of unitary mode of surrounding you by either something alive or something, you know, dead. Soil reabsorbing you, the flock keeping you in the consciousness of what you're supposed to be. It's really a lot of his words here you can really analyze in so many different angles. That's one of the really cool things about Nietzsche, is you can see the story, but you can also pause on it and think, well, what does he mean by this or that? And you can take it so many different angles, and that's why his work is so engaging, right? I shall join the creators, the harvesters, the celebrants. I shall show them the rainbow and all the steps to the overman. Now, when he says steps to the rainbow, you may not be familiar with this analogy here, but at the end of the rainbow, there's a pot of gold. There's wealth, right? But there's that leprechaun who tricks you. I mean, a leprechaun he's really hungry for his pot of gold, and he does a lot of trickery, to make sure that you can't get that pot of gold. And the closer you get to the rainbow, to the end of it, the more it disappears. So there's a little bit of Irish type of folklore he just put in right there. Now, when he says all the steps to the overman, that's what he means is somebody who can overcome his will, lead by example. Remember, Nietzsche felt that Christianity was a very feeble, weak religion. Okay? He was very open about that. And that when he said God is dead, he meant, the spirituality within the church. Right? So Nietzsche is taking a jab at meek, soft, weak people. And here he's using his character Zarathustra to kind of be this figure who comes from his hermitage in the woods to re-strengthen humanity, right? Someone who hasn't been polluted by the city. You see what I'm saying? To the hermits I shall sing my song, to the lonesome and the twosome, and whoever still has ears for the unheard of, his heart shall become heavy with my happiness. To my goal I will go on my own way. Over those who hesitate and lag behind I shall leap. Thus, let my going be their going under. Oh, jeez. Okay, so that one is actually a very clever yet potent example. What does he say here? He's going to go, his goal is to go on, only forward, right? And his own way. So he's going to be like, hey, I'm not going to go this way with this herd. I'm going to be a creator. I'm going to create a path, and I'm going to head that way. So very fearless, right? And then he contends over those who hesitate. So if you hesitate, you get struck down. I mean, if you think about this example, if you go to grab a snake, usually you're not supposed to be reckless, but you can't hesitate too much. I've learned this a lot with handling certain animals. You cannot overly hesitate because some animals really do sense your fear and they really will bite you first. With certain venomous creatures, you have to be reactionary and quick, not stupid and reckless, but you can't be like, ugh. Like if you're in a boxing match and you felt you could have taken that left jab, you could have taken that right hook, it's better to try to land it. Now, if you put all your energy behind it and you swing and miss, you dilute your energy, but if you do hit the mark right, you might KO your opponent, right? So he's saying here, don't hesitate. He doesn't want to hesitate. So his character is not one who wants to lag behind. So, lagging is like slothness, right? Oh, everyone's going ahead. I'm just going to hang here. I'm going to be hesitant. So he's really taking a jab. Remember, he really wants to kind of push people forward. That's why he says, I shall leap. When you leap, you can't hesitate. It's, okay, 1, 2, 3, go. You can't be like, 1, 2, 3, oh, stop. Right on the edge, right? You're going to go for it. You're going to take it. You got to go. Like in basketball, if you're on the three-pointer line, you aim for the corner of that box, and then you make if you hesitate, oh, there it goes. But if you're like 1, 2, 3, go, and you just took the shot, you took the shot, right? You didn't hesitate. You did a follow through. It was a smooth flow of energy that went out. Okay, so here you can see a very triumphant figure here, who says, "My goal is to go." Not to hesitate, not to lag behind, that he will leap. And that he says here, let my going be their going under. Now, if you don't know the game Leapfrog, you might not get that analogy. So, leapfrog is when somebody bends down, you run, you jump over them by pressing your hands on their back, and you go over them. So, you have now jumped the line, you've jumped the position. So, instead of waiting in line and letting them go in a linear fashion, you decided to do leapfrog, which is literally to hop over them. So, they go under and you go over, right? So here, just with these few lines, you begin to see the way in which he has solidified the type of strength in his character Zarathustra, right? Very important here. Okay, now we're on part 10. This is what Zarathustra has told his heart when the sun stood high at noon. Then he looked into the air, questioning. For overhead he heard the sharp call of a bird, and behold, an eagle soared through the sky in wide circles, and behold, on him there hung a serpent, not like prey, but like a friend, for she kept herself wound around his neck. Now that one is interesting. Okay, so usually you hear an eagle cry, you're gonna kind of duck a little bit, because if an eagle wants to take out your eyes, take off your nose, you better move. When a bald eagle comes around, get out of the way, right? You want to have your spear ready, like, hey, 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 hey. You never know. Especially if you have a fish in your hand, that eagle can swoop down, take it away from you quite easily, okay? Now, on the Mexican flag, there's it's either a golden eagle or a hawk. I forget which type of bird. But it is eating a serpent, right? And if you don't know, there are hawks, falcons, and owls, and predator birds who do enjoy eating serpents, reptiles. So here, Nietzsche has done something unique, as in, well, this snake is around the neck, and it's not choking the eagle, and the eagle is not pecking at it to eat it. So that is something that is like, what's going on here? It's wrapped around the neck, but it's not strangling the eagle. Some type of symbiotic relationship going on, right? It's really quite interesting. These are my animals, said Zarathustra, and was happy in his heart. The proudest animal under the sun, and the wisest animal under the sun. So look at that. Okay. This is really interesting because the proudest, the eagle. The wisest, the snake. Now, if you're not familiar with the symbology behind the snake, it has several meanings. So there's obviously the Christian angle of kind of a trickster. But there's also the Asian symbology where a wise snake. And the duality here is complex because a snake eats a lot of the excess rats and mice. And you can eat a snake. I don't think you can in Islam. But in Mexico, you'll eat some snake with some chili powder and lime. You get leather from them. But if you have chickens, well, that snake can eat too many of your chicken eggs and cause a problem. So there's a duality here of snakes being venomous, but also handling pest control, okay? This is something that is very unique, but a snake can never love you. You only can, entertain them. So when you see those musicians who have their little to the snake in India, and the snake's like, whoa, like you can put a snake in a trance, but the snake will never love you. The snake can only know what to do is to strike and be a snake. So we know that the symbology of the bald eagle, or of eagles in general, is pride, to soar through the sky. There's a reason why many nations choose a predator bird as their logo on their coins. Like I don't have one here, but the quarter in America, has the eagle. America's symbol is a bald eagle. The Native American tribes, The eagle's feathers were used in the chief's headdress. I mean, Mexico had a bunch of symbology of the golden eagles. You know, eagles we know are very uh, popular creatures, right? So, again, it's really interesting. So, again, here, a wise serpent and a proud eagle under the sun. A lot of symbology there. They have gone out on a search. They want to determine whether Zarathustra is still alive. Verily, do I still live? I found life more dangerous among men than among animals. Think about that for a second. Think about that. Isn't that true? I don't know. You can think about it. I mean, humans, being around humans in the city, robberies, carjacking, gangbangers, pimps, drug dealers, corrupt cops, corrupt judges, slimy, corrupt politicians, right? That is dangerous. If you see a cobra going by, you see him. You see a black widow spider, smush him. You know, you're not dealing with the jaguar or the Siberian tiger or the savannah lion anymore. You know what I'm saying? So being in a city is so dangerous than being in the forest. So that's a very good point. Is that life is more dangerous among men than among animals because humans scheme, plot, plan, try to, you know, do witchcraft. They power play on each other, right? If a scorpion stings you, it's probably because you're about to step on it. You feel me? So it's interesting. On dangerous path walks Zarathustra. May my animals lead me. So look at that. He's like saying, dangerous path is to walk amongst humans. May his animals lead him. When usually it's the reverse, where the human, you know, shepherds the animals. So Nietzsche has a way of twisting, you know, and making like your insight come out in a very different way, which is highly entertaining. When Zarathustra had said this, he recalled the words of the saint in the forest, sighed and spoke thus to his heart, that I might be wiser, that I might be wise through and through like my serpent. But there I asked the impossible. So I asked my pride that it always go along with my wisdom. And when my wisdom leads me on day, alas, it loves to fly away. Let my pride then fly with my folly. Thus Zarathustra began to go under. So, think about this for a second here. So, the wisdom. Remember here how he said earlier in part 9 that his goal is not to hesitate. Okay? Now, a snake is wise in that it doesn't exactly hesitate. A snake will watch when's the right time to strike, right? Who should I strike, right? A snake is interesting because when you grab it by the head and you hold it, sometimes the snake will just wrap around your hand, he'll wiggle. But if a snake perceives you as getting ready to harm it, it will strike you so fast that you will lose. And as a snake goes through the grass, you get to see how it moves about, how it slithers and goes forth. And if you've ever seen a snake swim, I don't know if you've seen a snake swim, but they are also quite forceful in their way. Quite, wow, they just going on through. And they know how to go on the water so quickly that they can get to the other side without getting eaten. A snake, most of its time is, you know, it really is avoiding predator birds, avoiding getting stepped on. A snake has a lot of work to do, right? So it is quite interesting. The way, just the whole aspect of a water snake versus a tree snake, grass snake, you know, they need to stay hidden. It's interesting how the animal iconography is based upon the behavior of the animals themselves. So when you see an animal used in literature, you need to think about how is that animal in literal nature and how is it written in a literary sense. And then you can get at the point that the author is trying to make. Okay, now we're in a new section of Zarathustra's speeches on the three metamorphoses. Now, a metamorphosis is to change, okay? And if you're going through a metamorphosis, that means you're not stagnant. So what did Nietzsche say in the beginning through his character? To be amongst those who harvest, to be amongst those who celebrate, to be amongst those who are creators. So it makes only sense that he's going to have a section that plays upon those words and ideas further. Of three metamorphoses of the spirit, I tell you, how the spirit becomes a camel, and the camel a lion, and a lion finally a child. There is much that is difficult for the spirit, the strong, reverent spirit that would bear much, but the difficult and the most difficult are what its strength demands. So here, that is really interesting. A spirit that is strong bears much. So the camel, for me, when I think of a camel, they gotta bear a lot. The heat, water deprivation, carrying things, carrying people, and walking through sandstorms, and they have to go and do a lot. Okay? So I wonder if he'll put the camel as that example, right? What is difficult? Asked the spirit that would bear much and kneels down like a camel wanting to be well loaded. Now look at that. How cool is that? The camel kneeling down, letting you to mount it, being able to train it to go down. Now, it is cool how a camel will do that. A horse is a little bit more difficult. Donkey, a little bit more difficult. Not really sure how well you could train an elephant. An elephant might use their trunk to let you step up, or they might kneel. But a camel is kind of cool because it gets down on all fours, right? What is most difficult, O heroes, asked the spirit that would bear much, that I may take it upon myself and exult in my strength. Is it not humbling oneself to wound one's haughtiness? Now this is interesting. Is it humbling to wound your haughtiness? Yes, right? That is one thing I can say. Now this is separate. It's not nothing to do with this, but Islam is based upon submission, and I know me personally, when Allah tests us with trials, tests us with suffering, we do become more humble and less haughty. When you're comfortable in the city, you have money, luxury, you're pampered, you have more haughtiness, right? A haughty person sometimes is that way because they haven't been bent to their will, like they haven't been pulled down, right? It's not that you snap and become like, ugh, you don't want to be a worm because you've been trampled on so much. But when you're too puffed up, right? Like, think of Conor McGregor, right? He was so haughty and he got humbled by Habib, right? Because he got so utterly defeated that it was just a joke. Just like, wow, he just totally got smashed. Yet he got slightly more humble, but he's still a loudmouth, drinking whiskey, walking really funny, So he has a good point here that why do we suffer and why do we go through this stuff? Because to cure haughtiness is to become humbled. And humbled isn't just by starving yourself and eating like a rabbit, right? That's the way the Buddhists do it. But you're going to go through more suffering of like mental tests, physical tests, whatever Allah puts in front of you. Because remember, he wants his his character Zarathustra to be the Ubermensch, to be the Superman, to be somebody who leaps, who doesn't hesitate, who goes forward, right? Somebody who leads by example. It's really quite interesting. Let one's folly shrine to mock one's wisdom. Or is it this, parting from our cause when it triumphs, climbing high mountains to tempt the tempter? Now that's cool. That one's kind of cool. Because I don't know how Christians would view it, but it's supposed to be that the devil tempted Jesus somewhere near a mountain. And there's a lot of people who talk about the emotions you feel on top of a peak of a mountain. Or you get into even darker examples of going to the top of the pyramid, seeing the one at the top, and then tempting the tempter, right? So whether it's good who you tempt with your behavior or bad whom you tempt with your behavior, who's ever at the top in the chair or there is going to be waiting for you as somebody who came up. So you can think of this in a business sense. You know, who's at the top of the mountain in your hierarchy in your company? You go up to them. You're tempting their anger. You're tempting their gaze. You know, you are making them come upon you. There's a lot of ways you can look at that. So many different ways you can look at that example. Or is it this? Feeding on the acorns and grass of knowledge, and for the sake of the truth, suffering hunger in one's soul. Now look at that. For the sake of truth, suffering hunger in one's soul. So we've all felt that, I'm pretty sure, right? I know I myself have a hunger for knowledge, where you have a deep sense of, I wish I could not sleep. I wish I could read and learn all the time. I want to learn this. I want to learn that. I love it. Now, don't compare that to like your boring university class with your boring teachers. No. But you may have some type of truth that you're pursuing in your life, right? And you have a hunger for it. When you have a hunger for it, you go for it. So you'll suffer, pains in your soul or in your physical body as well in order to get there, in order to pursue that. So for the sake of truth, you'll let your soul be afflicted so that you can chase that type of truth. It's really a potent example. Or is it this? Now notice the pattern here. What is he doing? Most of these paragraphs are starting off with, or is it this? Or is it this? Or is it this? So he's making you see that you as a reader have the ability to go on a trail of thought and think, is it that? Right? See, Nietzsche doesn't just tell you what to think, he kind of slaps you with his words, and then you get to go about thinking, well, what is he talking about? What does he mean? You feel me? Or is it this? Being sick and sending home the comforters and making friends with the deaf. Oh man. Who never hear what you want. Now this one is very cool. Think about that. Making friends with the deaf who never hear what you want them to hear. I think all of us can have an example where we ourselves were the deaf ones and where we have spoken to people who were deaf. They're our friends, but they're not really listening, right? And you try to give them advice, give them dawah, give them something, and you're still friends, but you're making friends with the deaf. Like, hello, are you there? And they're just like, what? So what? You're like, ah. So it's a very cool example, because why would you try to make friends with the deaf? But others would argue, as a cool semantic poetic way of going about it, is that you would then use sign language and speak in a way that the deaf can understand, right? If you want to transfer knowledge, there is not just one route of the audio, but of the visual. And then you get into the how do you administer knowledge through the different senses of reality and the mediums that you can communicate such messages. So, yeah, it is almost futile to make friends with the deaf, but the wise ones will try to give, for the sake of truth, knowledge to the deaf in a way in which can get around their deafness. Right? It's really cool, man. Nietzsche makes you think. Or is it this? Stepping into filthy waters when they are the waters of truth and not repulsing cold frogs and hot toads. Oh. Okay, so filthy waters when they are the waters of truth. What does that mean? Truth can be ugly, right? Truth isn't always going to be in the purest, crystal clear Hawaii water. Sometimes you gotta go into the swamp and, like, well, this is the truth. It's an ugly truth, but it's painful, but it's the truth. So we gotta suffer for the truth, right? And now, repulsing cold frogs. So a frog and a hot toad, you're getting into the temperatures here. A frog is smaller than a toad. And frogs, they're kind of like eating flies, like blah, 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 and you're like, ugh, it's kind of slimy. And a toad can eat a snake. They're kind of a little bit more creepy in a way because they look at you on their lily pad and they're just like, rabbit, rabbit. And you're like, ugh, it's a little scary. So if you're, I don't know, they're like creepy in a way, even though they're kind of harmless. Some are poisonous if you touch them, but that's usually the rainforest frogs that are bright colors. uh, but a swamp one is quite different, but they are kind of weird, right? When you see a frog, you think, you like, if you're in the water and there's a frog there, you're kind of like, ugh. So that's a really interesting thing because he says not repulsing cold frogs and hot toads. It really makes you think, right? Or is it this? Loving those who despise us and offering a hand to the ghost that would frighten us. Now look at that, right? Loving those who despise us? No way. I'd say don't do that. But remember, he might be doing something here where he mocks Christians. Because I myself know, if you despise me, I'm not going to love you. No, I don't think so. But extending a hand to the ghost that would frighten you, you're almost conquering the fear then. Because if something is scaring you and you stand there, it's like, it's almost like not letting a devil scare you out of your wits. So you're like, let's pretend that you actually saw a ghost. We'll use his example in the literal sense. So if a ghost there is like trying to freak you out, you could be like, hey, I am not going to let you scare me or something, right? You've sort of taken fear and conquered it and slapped it in the face. So that's a pretty cool thing. All these most difficult things, the spirit that would bear much takes upon itself, like the camel that burden speeds into the desert. Thus the spirit speeds into its desert. Now that's really interesting. Camels, they're gonna handle their business, right? Camel's gonna walk how he wanna walk. He gonna do what he's gotta do. He goes into the desert. He handled his business. I think an analogy to that would be a wild Mustang in America. There's not too many left, but I think there's like very few wild horses left. But they'll just trample upon, do what they gotta do, and handle their thing. So he's essentially kind of highlighting for us that our spirit, our soul, our will goes forward. No hesitation. He mentioned speed here. What did he say earlier? That you don't want to hesitate, you don't want to lag behind. Here he's reiterating his point by mentioning speed. Not saying that you just run randomly, but that you actually put some pep in your step, which is highly important. In the loneliest desert, however, the second metamorphosis occurs. Here the spirit becomes a lion who would conquer his freedom and be a master in his own desert. Here he seeks out his last master. He wants to fight him and his last god for ultimate victory. He wants to fight with the great dragon. Now here, oh my goodness, you have a lot of examples here. So in the desert, you feel more of a lion. Now let's think that. Conquers his freedom. So you almost have this sort of will to live. You're in heat, you're hallucinating, there isn't water, there isn't scenery, you just see sand upon sand upon sand, and there is less wildlife, And as every step you take, there could be an insect in there. There could be something lurking under the sand, a cobra. You don't know what it is. You don't really have as much control. The sand is also hot, right? So it gets hot and you can't really get around it too well. It can burn you, right? So here, the great dragon is another really interesting example because when someone uses the word dragon in literature, it usually means a great temptation, a great evil. Now, his mind, where you're in the desert, your will, has to try to overcome its own laziness. You have to press forward when you're in the desert. You have to come to a heavier challenge. This is what's really cool is that the people who endure the snow have a certain energy, and the people who endure the heat have a certain energy, and those who endure the humidity and the rain of the rainforest have another kind as well, right? So here it's like the ultimate victory is conquering the great dragon, mastering yourself, conquering your freedom as you are in a lonely desert. I mean, there's a reason why. I mean, so much of our great religion of Islam, think about the location of where it is, right? In the heat in the desert. So, for time immemorial, the desert has been something that, I mean, humans fear as much as the open sea, right? It's like, wow, like when you just have snow upon snow, sea upon sea, sand upon sand, it's like this is when your mind really starts to play with you. This is when you start to have a very deep sense of what's going on here, you know? Who is the great dragon, whom the spirit will no longer call Lord and God? Thou shalt is the name of the great dragon, but the spirit of the lion says, I will. Now, this is interesting here. So, thou shalt versus I will. Thou shalt lies in his way, sparkling like gold, an animal covered with scales. On every scale shines a golden thou shalt. This is very interesting imagery, isn't it? Values, thousands of years old, shine on these scales, and thus speaks the mightiest of all dragons. All value of all things shines on me. Now, this is interesting because the shiny dragon is more Asian because the water dragons of Asia were said to have shiny scales like the koi fish, but in other legends about dragons, the dragons were not shiny. So here is interesting how he has almost an Asian angle here with his imagery. All value has long been created. Isn't that cool? All value has long been created. And I am all created value. So, all value has long been created, and I am all created value. So, you get the sense of summation here. Verily, there shall be no more I will. Thus speaks the dragon. So, this is interesting because you're getting a sense of when someone says someone is a dragon, in Celtic, in Irish, in English, in Asian, in Mayan and Aztec culture, even in Native American culture, wherever you see the dragon mentioned, it is sort of like a beast. It is something overwhelming, right? So the dragon is saying, there is no more I will. There is only thou shalt. So the dragon is a gatekeeper to the riches, right? The dragon, he's on top of all his gold, his treasure, value, aka monetary stuff that has actual value. The dragon is sitting on top of it. If you want some of that, you got to get past the dragon. And that's when you get into, I mean, so many different great writers have spoken poetically about the symbology behind, do you kill the dragon? Do you trick the dragon? I mean, so many cultures have used the dragon type of metaphors in everyday life. I mean, people call their bosses dragons. They call society a big dragon. It's really quite interesting. Really quite interesting. My brothers, why is there a need in the spirit for the lion? Why is it not the beast of burden, which renounces and is reverent enough? Well, I think what I would say to that is, if all of us were camels, you know, then we'd have a bit of an imbalance. Because the spirit of the lion, as something with courage that hunts, that reproduces, that keeps the younger males in check, you know, it's a fierce creature. And a lion will face 12 hyenas. So a lion will fight even when the odds are against it, right? And you could go through several African examples of the lion. You could go with Roman examples and Greek examples of the lion. There's quite a lot. But the lion of itself, just very rich. So beast of burden was the camel example, don't forget. To create new values that even the lion cannot do, but the creation of freedom for oneself, for new creation that is written within the power of the lion, the creation of freedom for oneself, and a sacred no, even to duty. For that, my brothers, the lion is needed. Now, notice this. A sacred no. This is, okay, hold on. You need to really pay attention to this part. If the dragon is telling you, if you want what shines and you want what I have of value, come to me under the dragon's wing. I will keep you warm under the dragon's wing. But the lion has a sacred no. Like, no. No. To say no to a dragon is to risk getting burned, right? To refuse to sit under the dragon's wing and be controlled so that you have piles of gold underneath your feet is noble. The lion is the symbol of kings, and kings do not obey the dragon. Kings vanquish the dragon and take the gold for themselves, right? So you see a lot of metaphors, legends, all kinds of stuff being alluded to here of what does that mean? Okay. To assume the right to new values, that is the most terrifying assumption for a reverent spirit that would bear much. Verily, to him it's praying, and a matter for a beast of prey. He once loved, thou shalt, as much as sacred. Now he must find illusion and caprice even in the most sacred, that freedom from his love may become his prey. The lion is needed for such prey. So here you see another emphasis of the lion is needed for such prey. So those who find illusions, who seek illusions, they're prey for something that doesn't want illusion. You really get to see a quite unique aspect here, because he talked about creation of freedom for oneself, for a new creation. So you have this sort of creative energy here that he's speaking about. The dragon, when it's used in common language, the dragon doesn't create, he collects, he controls. The dragon is something that instills fear in the person, and it puts its giant wing above you and pulls you into it, and it tells you you will do this or you don't get the gold. Whereas the sacred no says, no, I will venture how I need to venture. I will hunt how I want to hunt. The lion seeks the shade of none. The lion seeks the everything under the sun. So you get to see a very cool example here. So, yeah, oh man. He gave great examples about the camel, about the dragon, and the lion. It just really talks about strength, really looking at what is wisdom, tempting the tempter, suffering for the sake of truth. that making friends with a deaf example was very cool. Handing your hand out to a ghost that would frighten you. just very excellent examples here for us in Zarathustra's speeches on the three metamorphoses. And don't forget the example of the eagle with the snake around its neck and him leaping over others, not wanting you to hesitate. You know, it's really quite profound. Very great writing, I must say. So hopefully you enjoyed that session of Nietzsche. Thus spoke Zarathustra. Remember, he is a German philosopher. He is somebody who quite sassy, for Christians, that is. But in the end, you can still learn a lot from him and look at him as a sort of literary figure throughout history. So, mashallah, hope all of you learned something, and see you later, fam.